Hey guys, welcome back to more Karen stories. In this video, a ridiculous Karen stole my electricity to mine Bitcoin. I taught her a lesson. Let's dive right into the video. The title story starts like this. I am all for understanding the grind and doing what you need to in order to make money. There's a line though, and it gets crossed when you do something illegal like this Karen did. So I live in an apartment complex that has a small private outdoor patio, the extra space is nice, and I keep a couple of plants out there, as well as a chair when the weather is nice. Around November, it started to hit the point where it was a little bit too cold for my comfort, so the patio door was locked and I didn't go out there. The other important note for how my apartment complex works is that I pay rent for the apartment, but the utilities like gas and electricity are my own responsibility, and the building has, in the basements, meters to read for each individual unit. I was not doing anything differently, but when I got my bill at the end of November, it was about 3 times higher than what I expected it to be. I contacted the building to see if there might have been an issue with the meter or if the price of electricity went up and I was just living under a rock and missed it. They double-checked and told me that the meter and my bill were correct. I started going around unplugging things that might have been using power. Finally, I went to my patio to see if I had left something plugged in out there. There was an extension cord coming out of my outlet and going into a unit a few doors down from me. I unplugged it and figured that the person stealing my electricity would get the picture that they had been caught and shut their little operation down. I also reported it to the building manager to cover my bases, and well, 2 days later I checked again and saw that the plug was back in and this time had a weird lock around it. Basically something that was holding the plug in place so it couldn't just be unplugged. I saw which apartment it was going in and decided to knock on their door and confront them. When the woman opened the door, I realized that this was Karen's apartment. I knew that this woman lived in my floor, but not the exact apartment number. She was well known for yelling at people in the lobby and taking up all the machines in the communal laundry room and then taking her sweet time when she knew people were waiting. In her mind, the world revolved around her. Me, why are you running an extension cord in my patio? Karen, not that it is any of your concern, but I'm busy mining bitcoins. That sentence right there made me understand the huge bill. I'm not the smartest when it comes to things like cryptocurrency, but one of the few things I do know is that mining Bitcoin uses a ton of power, and mining setups tend to be working 24/7. She for sure knew this and was trying to leech power, so she didn't have to pay for it. Me, you cannot use my electricity and rack up my bill. Remove the plug now and I expect you to pay for the bill you ran up. Karen, oh my god, sorry for the cringe spelling, but I swear this is how she said it, it's not that big of a deal. Neighbors share things with each other all the time, it's part of being a good person. Me, a cup of sugar and stealing my electricity is not the same thing. I'm not gonna waste my time arguing with you, so just tell me, are you gonna listen and remove it? Karen, no, I need it. This mining is my new business. I refuse to waste my limited time and energy to argue with a Karen. There's no way to reason with them, so I just contacted building management and they told me that they would speak to Karen, but for the bill I should file a police report. So I did just that, and after refusing to listen to the building manager, he called the police on Karen as well. They gained access and broke the locks she had in order to unplug her setup. It turns out that she was stealing from multiple neighbors that must have not figured out what was happening as fast as I did. Hell, me finding it was basically dumb luck. This was clear theft, and due to the fact that she was using it to power her Bitcoin mining rig, it was also now considered evidence. They took it away with her screaming that they cannot steal from her, not even paying attention to the fact that she was being arrested. The charges against her were 4 separate counts, each of electricity theft and utility fraud. Again, she only seemed concerned about getting her rig back, not caring that it was evidence of a crime she committed. To her, these charges were so minor and insignificant that she was blowing the whole thing off. To make things even better for everybody else in the building, she was getting evicted from her apartment. Not because she was not paying her rent or anything, but because of her mining rig. She was breaking at least 3 separate rules from her renter agreement, including stealing from her neighbors, but also running so much electricity into one unit that it could have blown out the whole system. I sadly did not get to show up to court and see exactly how everything went. I heard stories from the building manager who was able to go and see what was gonna happen, since if she was found innocent, he might have had to revoke her eviction. The main thing that I heard from him is the fact when Karen was told the harm she was doing, she had no remorse at all. She basically said that it was the right thing to do for neighbors, to be kind, and should have let her use the electricity, not agreeing that her rig is the reason for thousands of extra dollars on people's electric bills over the 2 billing months she was able to get away with it. Finally, when faced with the fact the building could have caught fire since extension cords are not made to handle that amount of power, she could only say, well, it didn't. I'm convinced that in her mind, since nobody was physically hurt or died or anything and no tangible items were taken, that she was not gonna get in trouble. She treated the trial like a lecture, and no matter who told her it was serious, I could see her not believing it. She probably expected a slap on the wrist and the ability to move back into the apartment and continue mining. Instead, the judge gave her 2 years in prison for all of the charges, not to mention that she was forced to pay the electricity bills of everybody she stole from. If she had not been greedy and instead just used her own power for this, she might have not gotten in any trouble at all. Or if her one unit couldn't handle it, ask the neighbors and offer them money for the electricity. So now she's in prison with her equipment, probably staying in police evidence for years, as I heard things tend to get lost in that system. Usually something I would be against, but if it happened to Karen, I would not bat an eye over it. And yeah, Ripe Stars, if you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because we are getting closer and closer to 130,000 subscribers. Thank you so much. And the next one is an insane mother-in-law story. So my mother-in-law and I went out to dinner as my husband and my father-in-law were out at a concert together. They are from out of state and were staying with us for a few days. My mother-in-law is intense and does not hold back on overly displaying how much she loves her son. Well, at dinner, after 3 martinis, and me completely sober as my husband and I are TTC, editor's note, this means trying to conceive, she looks at me and goes, "If you ever break my son's heart, I will effing kill you. I mean it. And his sister will too. She watches a lot of Dateline." I was so stunned that she said this after 6 years together and understanding how strong our relationship is. Her words in another conversation, "I could not have asked for a better wife for my son. You two are a perfect match and so blessed." Unfortunately, I was so stunned that I didn't respond the way that I wanted and kind of babbled on something about not needing to be worried. I told my husband this and he was appalled. My question is, when she undoubtedly says something offensive like this again, is there a way to respond that is stronger and defensive of myself? I just really cannot believe the tone with which she said it, and while this is not the first time she said it, it felt intense. Now some comments to this story. Don't be with her alone and go no contact. I agree with you, I think my husband needs to say something. I told him not to, because they only see each other a few times a year and I don't want them to fight while they are under my roof, but there may be no choice when something like this is said. Well, she certainly should not be around any future children. And then OP responded, and the stress about how she will act around my future child is already in full force. I think the point about how disappointing it is will also be key. Thank you so much. Update to the story. I first want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for the many encouraging comments. This whole experience was a major wake-up call to not allow someone to speak to me this way and reevaluate boundaries and people-pleasing tendencies. It also makes me realize that I'm not alone and I have several strong women in this community who stand up for themselves and are learning these lessons too. I would also like to add that never did I feel my life was in danger. I understand the severity of what she said, however, dramatic is her middle name, and this phrase is something I've heard her say to many others, including my DH's friends, for taking him on a hiking trip, whoa how horrible, and myself. This does not change how seriously we reacted to the comment though. So flash forward to the day they left, the morning after the incident and the morning that I posted, mother-in-law begins to send text after text with the most effusive love and support you could imagine regarding her stay with us and our loving home. We ignore them because we are both working and also who cares. The plan was for my DH to call her after work. She knows something is up because now she is calling me. I let it go to voicemail and having her husband, who rarely messages me, to see if I'll reply. My husband calls her as soon as he gets home and absolutely blasts her. While he was firm and calm, there was no mistaking that she was silent while he told her how unacceptable, disappointing, disturbing and unnecessary that comment was. Her response? That's just how I talk. Dear husband explains that no one speaks to his wife like that and no one understands her disjointed state of mind except for her. The call then ends. However, she calls him back 10 minutes later, classic move once she's thought about what manipulative thing to say, and we just ignored it. The following day rolls around and she calls again, this time saying that she was joking and we took it the wrong way. DH leans into her again, and we decide that I'll never be left alone with her. The hilarious thing about it is that dinner was the first time we were ever alone. DH finally lets me know for the first time ever that he has understood his mom's games since high school and that it is partly the reason he moved out of state. It goes way deeper than this, but wow, it was eye-opening. For now, I'm no contact with her and it looks like husband will be too. Monster-in-laws are no joke. Be safe out there and thank you again for the support. Some more comments. Many people are happy and relieved that OP's husband stood up for them and said, "Thank you very much for your support. Totally agree, I know that he loves his mom. This doesn't mean boundaries cannot be set, but I can only imagine how I would feel if I had to speak this way with my mom if she were to, God forbid, say something so unhinged." Unfortunately, my father-in-law does not stand up to her, and this is a pattern I've witnessed for years. My husband's words, no one keeps her in check aside from me. And the next one is a petty revenge story. So, old story and somewhat petty, but back when I was in college, I worked for DPS. I was the a-hole people hated and ticketed everyone. Anyways, I've been working at this job for 6 months minimum wage when we get a new manager. I worked this job because they worked around my class schedule. When this new manager started, they gathered us all up to say the following: "Your schedules will no longer revolve around your classes. That is not how the real world works. If you have a problem with this, then you're free to quit." Proceed to working new schedule for a week and being late to my classes, and I thought to myself, what's the point of a job if I cannot get to my classes? So I wrote up a resignation letter, emailed it to my supervisor. He was chill and was like, okay. Manager calls me and says I have to give her a minimum of 2 weeks notice and I cannot quit. Proceed to go to the office and hand her my letter of resignation. She then tells me how unprofessional I am and how I cannot use this place as a reference anymore. My response: "As I recall your exact words last week, if this schedule does not work, I should quit." She then proceeds to yell at me, and how dare I throw this back in her face. Then how she's going to report me to the university, but well, nothing happened and I still get a kick of how angry she was. It's been a few years, so I may have some details in the wrong order, but they are essentially correct. I purchased my townhouse in the late 2000s. The previous owners were motivated to sell for a good price. It was exactly what I wanted: 2 bedrooms, multiple bathrooms and a garage. From the mandatory home inspection, I was told about several potential problems with the unit. Some were internal and others dealt with an outside balcony, leaky windows and cracked exterior paint. Before finalizing the sale, I was given the opportunity to ask about these issues and was told that I was responsible for everything inside the townhouse and the outside problems were handled by the condo association. And also, I just had to submit requests for repair if I needed. The condo association fee was very cheap for this area, so I considered that a plus. I closed on the sale and I moved in without any problems. The total number of units in the complex is about 130, so it is a decent size. Some of them have 2 bedrooms, some have 3, and only a few, like mine, have garages with exterior balconies on them. When I moved in, I was presented with a list of the association's bylaws for the property. Nothing major, most were what you would expect, like keeping your entryway clean, dogs on leashes, guest parking and such. There was a 1 pet limit that I could see everyone was ignoring, so I saw they were a bit lenient with the rules. I became friends with a neighbor and she told me that the association was slow to handle problems. In fact, most of the units, co-joined in groups of 6 or more, were in dire need of new paint. Almost every unit had problems with their windows, but the association was only replacing windows on the backs of the units and only a handful at a time. The association's communication was pretty poor. We would get infrequent newsletters, but they had an underlying tone of, "We will get to your issues when we can, no sooner than we feel like." They would also announce condo association board elections, but there seemed to be little interest, so they would appoint other owners to the board as needed. About 2 years in, I got a printed newsletter from an owner in the complex who we will call Mike, claiming the board is ignoring the owners. It detailed a few things that were not being addressed, like the paint and windows, and owner protests were being ignored. The board was not even holding annual open user meetings, which are specified in the association bylaws. Those meetings were also for holding elections of new board members. The letter demanded a change in the situation. Enter Karen. This was not her actual name, but it rhymes with Karen. She was the association's treasurer on the board. She was controlling the board and her word was apparently law. That newsletter specifically called for her to step down. Next thing we know, there is an official association newsletter mailed to us that calls the owner's newsletter a complete fabrication and claimed Mike had ulterior motives. There was nothing to address the problems Mike mentioned, it was just a generalized attack on him. Mike was initially asking for access to the association's books and the association refused to show them to him. This is guaranteed in the association bylaws. We received another newsletter detailing this and how he was going to take them to court if he was continually blocked. Another response from the association was mailed, but it was just attacking Mike and questioning his motives. I was then visited by another neighbor who was circulating a petition demanding change and I gladly signed it. Nothing was being done aside from standard groundskeeping and the occasional emergency repair. We received a few more letters from Mike and several rebuttals from the association, and Mike successfully sued to have access to the books. From the newsletters, he reported that what he saw was just a list of code numbers, not names, and dollar amounts for payouts. There was no way to really know who was receiving the money or why. Somewhere in all these newsletters, it was revealed that Karen, who was an accountant, was being paid by the association for her time. She is an accountant. Mike's newsletters also revealed that Karen chose the maintenance company, which was managed by Maren, Karen's sister. Wow, that was surely a surprise. Not. The situation was getting worse, tensions were high. Somewhere in here, the association mailed out a newsletter that claimed all the rebuttals they were mailing out were costing them a lot of money, more like $50 if you considered the postage, and it had to stop. Also, they announced that they were accepting candidates for the new election and the form had to be mailed back in by a certain date. It was a step in the right direction, but I soon realized that we received the newsletter on a Saturday and the deadline for submitting was the following Tuesday. Karen could easily claim that no one had sent in their forms by the deadline. Other owners told me she had been doing this trick for years so she could appoint anyone she wanted to the board. The association was using a PO box and the only way to get an application in on time was to go to the post office where the box was on Monday and send a certified letter to prove that it was received in time. Fat chance. Mike and his friends had hand-delivered those newsletters. One time I saw someone walking around the complex delivering the newsletter. I went down to retrieve it from my mailbox right away, but I also noticed that Karen was going to every mailbox pulling these newsletters out and was throwing them into the garbage as she went. I heard her say something like, "It was not legally mailed." After that event, Mike sued to force a proper election and the judge ordered it. For the election, we had to have a 2 out of 3 owner majority present either by attendance or by signed proxy. On the day of the election, many of us arrived at the meeting and we noticed a security guard was standing by Karen, who was checking everyone in and giving them a ballot. She was expecting trouble. I heard her tell people that they couldn't vote because they were in arrears with their monthly dues, had outstanding fines, or were told they were not the official owner of record. She disqualified many people, there were some arguments, but the security guard kept things civil. Note that our bylaws don't say anything about who can and cannot vote aside from the owner on record. On top of that, only a couple of candidates made it onto the ballot, excluding Mike and several others who had definitely applied. The meeting started with Karen giving some general information and the members were talking amongst themselves a lot. Many were PO'd about being refused a ballot and others were complaining about all the candidates missing from the ballot. One of the last bits of information was that Karen announced that they would refuse any future letters sent by certified mail because it required someone to go to the post office and acknowledge delivery on a certain date. She would normally get the mail whenever she felt like it. Karen was trying to circumvent the law by conveniently ignoring timely letters like candidate applications and our monthly dues. Some owners brought up the possibility of re-entering Mike and the other candidates onto the ballot as write-ins and the crowd voted with him, but the board refused to recognize the vote. Lastly, the votes were collected and counted, but the board president announced that they did not have a majority, so the election would be cancelled. We were only short a few people. The number of people Karen did not give ballots to would have tipped the balance. What a surprise! The board quickly adjourned the meeting and left before people realized what was happening. That was a fun night, no one was happy. Mike was paying out of his own pocket for his lawyer and it was getting expensive. I heard the number $20,000 was mentioned. People did help defray the cost by donating to the cause though. Mike was not done. He went back to court another time to sue for a legal election. There was nothing in the bylaws that denied voting rights for past due balances, and Karen lied about at least one owner not being the owner of record. Armed with that information, the judge ordered another election to be supervised by an independent third-party lawyer. As I recall, the association's lawyer quit because they kept going against his advice. They replaced him with a yes man. The third-party lawyer was in complete charge of the election, including collecting candidate applications. A reasonable deadline for applications was set, 2 weeks, and proxy ballots were sent out as well. Karen's position was up for election, as were 2 other positions. We found out that the board president was appointed by Karen, but he was not an owner and had to step down. Only owners can serve on the board. Finally, the election came and pretty much everyone showed up, or had provided proxy votes. There was definitely a 2 out of 3 majority present, not including proxy votes. The lawyer called for 3 volunteers from the owners to count the ballots. The results were that 4 new people joined the board that night. They had gotten around 80 to 90 votes each, another active board member got 17 votes and Karen got 15 or something like that. We presume her votes were all proxy votes. I was wondering if they were going to go after Karen for getting paid and cooking the books, but the new treasurer received everything with proper records, names this time and not numbers. And then the maintenance company was tossed out almost immediately. Karen sold her unit and moved to Florida, but not before arranging for some exterior beautification around her unit, complete with plant boxes, flowers and shrubs. We think she saw the writing on the wall and moved out before any backlash could occur. The association's lawyer was also replaced. Then came the bad news. The association had to pay out almost $50,000 in legal fees to fight against Mike and his lawsuits. Since the association was paying for the lawyer, we could not put the bill on Karen. What a pity. We later discovered that the long-term project fund used for major upkeep of the complex was pretty badly depleted and needed to be refilled. Our lawyer advised us that for the size of the complex it needed to be over $2 million, but there was less than $1 million in the fund. Fortunately, they did not demand assessments but instead raised the monthly dues to start making up the difference. In the 15 years I've been here, the dues went from $150 to $375 and go up annually now. Karen had ignored many of the long-term projects, and in the next 2 to 3 years the buildings were repainted, the roofs were reshingled, bad windows were replaced and all the balconies were completely rebuilt. In more recent years, our insurance company demanded we repave the roadway because it was falling apart in places. They would not insure it unless that was done immediately. These days we have a better and more responsive maintenance company and a Facebook page for general announcements and chit-chat. There are no real winners in this case, but after all of the required improvements were done, most of us feel better living here than during the dark time of Karen's reign. And yeah guys, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. And also check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on Spotify, Amazon, Audible and other podcast platforms. You will often find exclusive episodes and early access to new content. Furthermore, please check out my Patreon by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or my YouTube membership program for even more exclusive stories. Thank you so much and I will see you again tomorrow.